The more diverse your microbiome is, the better your overall health is in terms of your microbiome. You want to have a whole bunch of different kinds of bacteria that are there. When you have that diversity, it prevents one of them from going crazy and overgrowing and causing problems. That's usually where the issues come from. It's when you have one or two different kinds of bacteria that just go nuts for any number of reasons, and then you end up developing some kind of disease state secondary to it. It might be something really mild like some diarrhea, but it could also be something really bad as Clostridium difficile, which could be life-threatening depending on the patient who gets that illness. So we are shooting for diversity. What we know is that no matter what your microbiome is, no matter what bacteria you have in there, if you eat a diet that is high in soluble and insoluble fibers, you will increase the diversity of your microbiome. Welcome to No Filter Doctor, where we cut through the health hype, dig into what's real, what's backed by evidence, and what works. I'm your host, Dr. AK. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am so excited for you to join me this week. We are going to talk about a nutrient that I think is somewhat elusive, but it kind of is simple too. It's fiber. We hear about it all the time. We're told if we're constipated, eat fiber. But then again, if things are moving too quickly and we have diarrhea, we're told to eat fiber. It's a little bit confusing. But what is fiber? What are the benefits of it? Is there any evidence to support it? It is a carbohydrate, but there's different kinds of fibers. So we need to know all of that. There's a lot of benefits to our microbiome when it comes to fiber. There was this 2025 umbrella review, which is a review of the meta-analyses and systematic reviews. There were 17.2 million patients that were included in this umbrella review. And hands down, fiber definitely has benefits. It can reduce the incidence of cancer. It can improve our all-cause mortality. But again, how much do we need? What form does it come in? And how can we increase our fiber? So that's what we're going to get into today. Fiber, very simply, is a carbohydrate, but it's the non-digestible part of plants. So plants have a cell wall. That cell wall is pretty thick, and we can't digest that. That is what creates fiber, and it comes in two different forms. There's soluble and insoluble fiber. Now, soluble fiber is usually the flesh of a plant, say an apple, right? The inside of that apple is the soluble fiber. This soluble fiber absorbs water and creates this gel-like substance in our GI tract. It is fermentable by the bacteria that are in our microbiome, and that helps create those short-chain fatty acids that we've talked about before when we talked about gut microbiome and gut health. The other thing it does is it slows down the digestion of foods. That helps decrease your glycemic index. Remember, a high glycemic index is a food that you eat and it shoots your blood sugar up really, really high. It's a big spike. It's there transiently. It goes away. Those are the foods that we want to try and avoid. The moderate to low glycemic index foods are ones that take some time to digest. They slowly provide glucose over time so you can utilize it better. And those are the more favorable foods. So the foods that have soluble fiber, they help lower that glycemic index. The other thing that soluble fibers do in that gel-like substance, the thought is that it also gobbles up a lot of the fats and cholesterols that can contribute to the amount of dietary fat and cholesterol that we eat. So all good things with the soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber is a little bit different. It is not fermented by gut bacteria, so we don't have any of those short-chain fatty acids. The main role of insoluble fiber is to add bulk to your stools. It absorbs water, and it helps prevent you from being constipated. Insoluble fibers are usually in the skins of different fruits and vegetables. So we use an apple as the example for soluble. The apple skin would be the insoluble fiber. It is really important to know the difference between these two because they perform different functions. So if your goal is to lower your glycemic index or maybe improve your lipids, eating a whole bunch of insoluble fiber is not going to help with that. And Let's say you have diarrhea and really loose stools, and you're like, you know what? My doctor told me to eat more fiber. If you go and you eat more insoluble fiber, you are going to make that way worse. So that's why it's really important to know the difference between a soluble and insoluble fiber, how you're getting them, and what the sources are from. There are so many health benefits when it comes to fiber. It reduces our risk of cardiovascular disease. There's evidence of reduction of cancer. There's evidence of improved metabolic health. There's evidence of improved digestive health. And fiber does this through many different interactions and mechanisms in our body. I talked about one of them already, and that's the modulation of gut bacteria and the development of those short-chain fatty acids. The short-chain acids specifically are acetate, propionate, and butyrate. They have anti-inflammatory effects. They improve the gut barrier and function. They regulate immune responses. They also influence our overall metabolism, glucose intake, and lipid profile. It's through these mechanisms that we have the improvement of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease and lipid panels. It also helps prevent the risk of colorectal cancer because of that improved barrier and decreased inflammation. Improved glycemic control and better insulin sensitivity comes from that slow digestion of the soluble fiber moving through our digestive tract. The other thing that soluble fibers do is they bind up bile acids. They do this in the gut, which helps decrease inflammation because those bile acids, when they touch the gut wall, they can have inflammation. But the other thing that it does is it decreases the absorption of cholesterol. This is where that reduction in LDL cholesterol comes from in people who are eating high fiber diets. Fiber is also an appetite suppressant. Not in the way that you would normally think. It helps us feel fuller because it adds bulk to the foods that we are eating. But it also stimulates gut hormones like GLP-1. And if you think about everything that we know about GLP-1 now and all of its positive effects for the people who are taking it exogenously, fiber can help stimulate your own internal GLP-1. One of the other added benefits of fiber is that it improves your microbiome. So I mentioned this a few times, and we did a podcast on it in the past, but briefly, I'm just going to touch upon this again. Your microbiome is the collection of bacteria that live all over you. It's everywhere. I mean, for those of you who are germaphobes, I hate to break it to you, but you are covered in bacteria and you have them inside your GI tract. Those bacteria are often put in a category of good versus bad. But let me tell you, the NIH spent a lot of money for us to learn about this gut microbiome. Good or bad is relative. It has to do with the person's age, their immune status, and so many other things with their overall health. So let's leave that behind. We're not going to talk about good bacteria versus bad bacteria. We are going to say diversity. The more diverse your microbiome is, the better your overall health is in terms of your microbiome. You want to have a whole bunch of different kinds of bacteria that are there. When you have that diversity, it prevents one of them from going crazy and overgrowing and causing problems. That's usually where the issues come from. It's when you have one or two different kinds of bacteria that just go nuts for any number of reasons, and then you end up developing some kind of disease state secondary to it. It might be something really mild, like some diarrhea, but it could also be something really bad as Clostridium difficile, which could be life-threatening depending on the patient who gets that illness. So we are shooting for diversity. What we know is that no matter what your microbiome is, no matter what bacteria you have in there, if you eat a diet that is high in soluble and insoluble fibers, you will increase the diversity of your microbiome. That right there is the main reason why I don't do microbiome testing or do any of that stuff. I'm not selling any probiotics. Half the time, those probiotics don't even get to your intestines. Your stomach kills them all. So if you really want to improve your microbiome, which is important, a high fiber diet is the way to achieve that goal. That then leads us to the question, okay, well, how much fiber should we be eating? Well, the National Academy of Medicine says that we should have at least 14 grams of fiber for every 1,000 calories that we eat. So it really comes down to what is your ideal caloric intake. I really love doing body composition scans on the patients that come into the office because I get an estimated basal metabolic rate. Now, that estimated basal metabolic rate is basically the amount of calories that your body needs per day just to exist. If you were a lump on a couch, that is how many calories a day you need to keep your body moving and going and staying nourished and healthy. And that is what I usually use to target what someone's individual fiber intake should be. Now, if we want just a number that probably hits and benefits most of the population, the recommendation is usually around 25 grams for women and 40 grams for men. But again, that is going to vary based on your calories. If you don't know what your minimum number of calories is, I would stick with 25 for women and 40 for men. When people are talking about high fiber studies, it's usually those values that they're counting as high fiber. So if you ever hear, oh, you need a diet in high fiber, it's the numbers that I just quoted to you. But here's a big problem in the United States. Fiber happens to be a shortfall nutrient, which means that most Americans do not eat enough fiber every day. The US average is around 17 grams per day. Now, I don't want to bore you to death and go through all the individual foods and tell you, oh, this is soluble, this is insoluble. So I'm going to give you some general rules. And if you want details on exactly which foods to eat for what, I do have a chart on the blog. So in general, when you're talking about fruits and vegetables, the edible skins are insoluble fiber, and the fleshy meat part is the soluble fiber. Beans typically fall in the soluble category. Barley is in both. Barley is soluble and insoluble. Oats are also both, but mostly soluble. Wheat bran, corn, and brown rice are in the insoluble category. The other added benefit of brown rice is whenever it cools down, it becomes what's called a resistant starch. And there's more data coming out now that these resistant starches are very, very beneficial to the microbiome, more so than just eating soluble fiber. So that's just a very brief list of foods. You can Google foods that are high in fiber, or like we talked about last week, using AI to get healthy. This might be something where you assign the role of a nutrition expert, especially in the field of fiber, and then ask some questions on what foods are out there that would benefit you in terms of soluble and insoluble fiber. See how I'm tying it all together and connecting those dots? The good news about eating fiber is there are very few downsides. Yes, you can get a little discomfort in your GI tract. You can get bloaty, you can get farty, but oftentimes this happens whenever somebody's transitioning from a low fiber diet to one that's a high fiber diet. You require enzymes. We've talked about this before as well. Your body, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. So we talked about this when we were talking about gluten. A lot of people are intolerant to gluten, not because they have an actual sensitivity or because of celiac disease, but because their body doesn't make enough of the enzyme to dissolve it. But the reason why your body won't make enough of the enzyme is you don't eat it. So you have to expose your body to something for your body to then make that enzyme. Fiber's the same way. If you don't eat a lot of fiber, you don't have a lot of the enzymes that you need to break it down, and so you can get that bloatiness and gassiness. So the best way is to gradually transition into a higher fiber diet. I would not go from one where you really don't get that much fiber to just eating a whole bunch of salad and brown rice and beans. You are going to mess your stomach up. The other thing that helps a lot is adequate hydration, right? We talked about with soluble fibers and insoluble fibers, they both take in water. That's one of the benefits and advantages that they have on our GI tract. So if you're going to start eating a diet that's high in fiber, you're going to need to make sure that you drink enough water as well. I honestly think the easiest way to transition to that low fiber to getting to a higher fiber diet is to start with fruits and vegetables. If you get 4 to 6 servings of fruits and vegetables throughout the day, you are on your way to a wonderfully high fiber diet. You can then gradually start adding whole grains, things that I talked about, the brown rice, barley, rye, farro. Obviously, for people who are gluten sensitive or who have celiac disease, you're not going to start gobbling up whole wheat. But there are other grains that you can have that will help with that. I made a transition with that with pasta in our house, and I will tell you, whole wheat pasta, the consistency is a little bit tougher and harder than the pastas that we're used to eating. So that was tricky. I had to first do a 50-50 mix, 50 of the enriched with 50 of the whole wheat. And then I was able to get to the whole wheat. And now my family's down with whole wheat pasta. They accept it just like we did regular pasta in the past. The other nice thing about those whole grains is a lot of them have protein as well. So now you're getting that additional add of protein, and you're having this fiber that you need to help balance out your diet. This can honestly be tough to do. Not because eating healthy foods is tough to do, but mentally it's tough to transition to that, especially if you have kids in your household or if you have picky eaters in your household. So one of the things that we do in my house is we will pretend like we're on some kind of cooking show, and we will rate the different foods and say whether we like them or not. And that makes trying these different foods that we were not used to eating before a lot more fun. We've always eaten healthy in my house. We are not one of these like bags of potato chips and packs of Oreos types of house. We still eat them time to time. It's not like they're banned from our home, but they're not really a staple of our meal. Having to kind of kick it up a notch to get more fiber, people in my house are like, "Are you serious? We already eat so healthy." So we gamified it a little bit. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. Hopefully, you don't have to do too many tricks, and you and your family will be opening to trying new things. But I would just look at this as another adventure. Getting more fiber without question has profound health benefits. If you're not really someone who wants to try different foods and experiment with these different grains to get that fiber, I totally get it. I'm not trying to push an agenda or anything like that. If you want some kind of supplement, I would say psyllium husk is probably the biggest bang for your buck because it has both soluble and insoluble fiber in it. Just watch, because it might say on the package of the fiber, this might contain lead. So you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're taking is third-party verified, or you can try the foods. It's entirely up to you how you feel like tackling this. So that, my friends, is your update on fiber. You know the different mechanisms now. You know the health benefits. You know different types of foods that are out there. You know about the two different kinds of fiber. I think you are ready for this. I think you are ready to go out there and help us turn around this being a shortfall nutrient in the United States. Try and get that 25 grams for women and 40 grams for men. And I'm looking forward to talking to you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's No Filter Doctor. If you enjoyed the content, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also go to www.thewholehumanhealthandwellbeing.com and sign up for the weekly newsletter, where you will get a link to the blog, that week's podcast, and a health tip of the week sent directly to you. It's important to know that while I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and it's not intended as medical advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. The information discussed should not be used to diagnose, treat, or prevent any medical condition, nor should it replace individualized medical care. If you have questions or concerns about your health, please contact your own healthcare provider. Any decisions to delay or forego a medical evaluation or treatment based on the information discussed in this podcast are made so at your own risk. My only financial disclosure is my medical practice, The Whole Human Health and Wellbeing. Take care, and I'll talk to you next week.